Back in the spotlight ahead of the November election. Surprise. The Justice Department urging the swing state to stop its attempt to clear ineligible voters from debates. The latest Real Clear Politics average shows Governor Mitt Romney ahead by just 1 point with 29 electoral votes at stake. What implications could the controversy have on the race for the White House? That's the question at hand. And joining us now for a fair and balanced debate on that, Matt Schlapp, former White House political director under George W. Bush, and former Pennsylvania Congressman Joe Sestak. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Good to be with you, Heather.
So, Matt, I'm going to start with you. Is this so-called purge list an attempt to protect the integrity of the voter list or an attempt to sway the outcome of the election?
No, it's an attempt to make sure that the vote that happens in Florida in November is one that the American people can have confidence in. I spent over a month during the recount of the presidential election in 2000, and when races are close, voter fraud can make a difference. And how not even just fraud, but the small decisions that are made in counties on which ballots are accepted or not accepted can make a difference. And Florida is doing the right thing, and I think the Obama administration is looking like old-style Chicago hacks when they try to stop the people in Florida to make sure that the American principle of one American, one vote is upheld.
Congressman Sestak, some harsh words there from Matt. What do you think?
Well, I applaud the governor of Florida's efforts to make sure that one of the bedrocks of voter integrity, accurate voter list, is actually that way. But I also know that the Obama administration's Department of Justice did the right thing, because by the National Voter Registration Act of 1995, no state in the union can try to have a wholesale purge of its voter list within 90 days of an election, and the election is in August for the primary in Florida. Second, I think that you cannot try to have accurate voter lists that could harm actual people who are on the voter registration legally and are kicked off. And that's why the Republican Secretary of State appointed by Governor Perry resigned in February and said, I can't go by this process. We're relying upon inaccurate databases too close to the election. The new Secretary of State actually just wrote to the U.S. government and said, we don't have the means in Florida to know with accuracy whether we have the right types of databases. Can you help us? Yeah. So my point is, in the Navy you learn, if you excuse my sailor language, piss poor planning leads to poor execution. Let's do this, get accurate databases, but not try to do it outside of the law within 90 days of election. Let's take our time and do it right as Democrat and Republican together.
Well, and let's take a closer look at those numbers. You know, a search of the database, it turned up an initial list of about 180,000 people who were registered to vote but could not, but could be possibly non-citizens. The list has so far narrowed down that list to about 2,600. Florida has 11 million registered voters total, and the Miami Herald found that Hispanics, Democrats, and people with no party affiliation were most likely to be flagged in the state search for the non-citizen voters. In fact, they found out about 58% of those singled out are Hispanics, who account for about 13% of Florida's active registered voters. So, Matt, does this unfairly single out certain groups?
Look, in a recent poll, Heather, 64% of African Americans said that voter fraud is real. The black former congressman who seconded Barack Obama's nomination in Denver 3 years ago, who's now switched parties and is a Republican, has said that he's seen voter fraud in the African American communities in the congressional district that he represented. There's no question that voter fraud occurs in this country, and it could even occur in Florida. And the fact that these election officials are trying to take these appropriate steps to make sure their voting record is as clean as possible should be applauded. Look, they're just human beings. There's always going to be an error rate. They're always going to make mistakes. The good thing in voting is you have the ability, and I tell all your viewers, if you're told that you're not on the voting rolls, go ahead and vote. You cast what's called a provisional ballot. They're almost always accepted. These people aren't going to be denied their chance to vote, but at the same time, shouldn't we balance that out by taking off the thousands of people in Florida that have no legal right to vote? They're voting illegally. That's fraud and it's illegal.
Yeah, and Congressman Sestak, as we wrap up there, Florida's voter registration and counting process notoriously famous, as Matt mentioned. Take 2000, then Texas Governor George W. Bush's 537 vote victory, as determined by the U.S. Supreme Court, over Vice President Al Gore, won the White House for President Bush in 2008. President Obama won Florida over Republican John McCain by 2.8 percentage points. 2012 looks to be just as close, if not closer. 29 electoral votes up for grabs. So what's the significance of this state?
It's very significant. But I think that and Matt's not wrong on wanting accurate voter lists. It's the process, however. You know, the Association of County Supervisors of all the 67 counties of Florida said, we're not comfortable with this. In fact, after they were given the 2,600 voters that were said, maybe out of these 180,000 you mentioned, Heather, maybe 2,600 we should check out on. After they did the first 500, they were finding on there a World War II vet who fought in the Battle of the Bulge, won the Bronze Star. My point is, let's do this well and right. I know it's going to be a battleground state, but I don't care if it's Republicans that are disenfranchised or Democrats.
Yeah.
I care, after 31 years in the military, that we do this right. And if you want to focus on something, remember, 5% of the vote in Florida are overseas voters like military. And in the last presidential election, 18% of their ballots, even though they were sent in, weren't counted. Let's make sure that those who are eligible get to vote.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both so much for joining us. I have to wrap it up there. We do know it's going to be a close one. Thank you for joining us.